Hey everybody, before this week's show starts, I wanted to remind you I have a new video podcast called the Tag Team Talent Podcast. That's the Tag Team Talent Podcast, available on YouTube and Spotify, where I share videos of all the comics you've been listening to all these years. So if you get a chance, check out the Tag Team Talent Podcast right away.
This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Hi, and welcome back to the podcast, man. We have something exciting for you this week. There's a young lady who has been in the comedy business as a comic and as a producer, and she wrote a book. I know, who thought in this day and age somebody would write a book about something so exciting as stand-up comedy? I'm excited because I've been in the business 100 years, but this young lady wrote a book called How to Host a Comedy Show. That's right, How to Host a Comedy Show. And her name's Tina Cruz. She's here with us today to talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, comic, producer, entrepreneur extraordinaire, and now an author, Tina Cruz. Wow.
Thank you so much for having me.
Tina, nice to have you on the podcast. Congratulations on putting this book together.
Well, thank you for having me and also for taking the time. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we both are of a kindred spirit. I'm probably 3 times your age, but we both have been in the comedy business a while. Now, let's give everybody a foundation. You've done stand-up comedy yourself. How long have you done comedy?
I've been doing stand-up comedy for the last 3 years almost, but I've been a performer and a musician for the last 20.
Yeah, and that does give you a basics for comedy. I mean, if you're a musician and you've done some other acting or performing, at least you're comfortable in front of an audience, which is one of the main walls that people hit that want to get into stand-up comedy. But so it's been only 3 years as a comic, when did you start producing shows?
Well, I started producing shows in November 2024, which meant, so not very long into it. And it got to the point, actually, when I started my show that I wanted a space for me and my friends to be able to do comedy together and to put on shows. You know, it's kind of like, when you're a kid, you kind of had like your backyard show, right? Like
right.
You kind of entertain the kids in the back, and it kind of reminded me of that, except like an adult version of that, essentially.
Right. And I think what's really fascinating is for somebody as me that's been in the industry more than 50 years, and I've produced literally thousands of shows, that one of the things I've run across year after year is that there's not enough quality run open mics, and the ones that seem to do well are started by somebody like you that has a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit and takes the responsibility of production, because the production of the show is so important for the comfort of the audience, for the success of the comics. It really can make a huge difference. Now, I go back to the days where in San Francisco, guys would actually get up on a soapbox in a laundromat and start practicing their comedy. But for you, being able to take a restaurant banquet room or the corner of a bar and turn it into an intermittent comedy show where people can kind of lay down some open mic lines and see if they catch that comic itch. The shows you've produced, where and when have you been doing them?
So we have our shows on Tuesdays at Enster Mackay, 1244 Rue Mackay in Montreal. So we have 2 shows, one at 8 p.m., which is typically our English stand-up pro-am show. And then we also have a theme show at 10 p.m. So it could be, usually I like to be more experimental with this one, where we do like a secret show. We've also done a headliner series. For example, this coming week, we actually have Serge Nkuzi from Ottawa, who's going to be dropping by. And we also do things like flight club, right? So next month we're having a different theme. So so typically we have it once a week. We also are working on building our brand and our show. So we also have a pizza show at Pizza Logis every other Saturday of the month. So I mean it's really great. We're very blessed and very fortunate to be able to have a space to do comedy.
Yeah, it is difficult to find a quality space. I got my start back in 1980 in a banquet room of a fine dining restaurant, and they were using the banquet room during the day, and I converted it into a comedy club at night. But I did it 6 nights a week and literally opened a full-time club. Now, you're up in Montreal, Canada. It sounds like you're getting some open micers out, but what is exciting about setting up a room like this is every now and then a professional will drop by, as you mentioned, and that is not only great for the audience, but for the amateurs, the open micers, to see a professional work, I think, is so important.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, just to clarify, the 8 p.m. show and the 10 p.m. show is it's not an open mic. We do have professionals, semi-pros, and we also like to book like newer comedians also on the show. We do have like a separate sister mic that's on Fridays that I usually have it as a multidisciplinary mic. So when I'm training new hosts, to be able to do the Tuesday show, essentially, I usually have that as a low stakes environment for them because a lot of time, actually, I talk about this in the book. A lot of time about hosting a room can be very difficult because it's not only just being able to bring up the act, but it's also being able to navigate the energy in the room, right? So like being able to read people very quickly, being able to be very quick on your feet, how can you be funny but not be aggressive, right? So essentially one of the things that I focused on, especially with writing this book, is the idea of being able to be engaging without being mean. Because I've been to a lot of shows where sometimes the host would get very aggressive, and I would see, sometimes audience members be like, yeah, never going to another show like that again, which makes it so that it's not sustainable for the industry, which I know you've been in the industry for such a long time, but also too for our audience, because I feel like sometimes the hard part as an audience member is that we feel like we're just watching people just try to do jokes without really understanding how the energy of the room is facilitated,
Well, I think it's so important that you stated everything you just shared, Tina, because as I mentioned, the production or the producing of a show is so much more than people think. You're not just grabbing comics and throwing them up. If you're doing it correctly, you're formatting the comics. If you have a dirty guy, put him at the end. You don't want some guy that's dirty and then follow him up with a clean comic. And then, as you said, read the room. If you've got a bunch of 22-year-olds, it's different than if you have a bunch of 40-year-olds. And you want to, as the host, and I think this is what you explain in your book, is that you want to set the tone for the evening. So the host should be clean, interactive with the audience in a nice way. And as you mentioned, reading the room and finding, getting the audience engaged in the proper way. Not only does that benefit the audience, but it benefits the comics if they go into a situation where the people are prepared and set up properly. Now, in your book, you mentioned creating trust with an audience, regulating the energy, protecting the audience experience, and keep the show moving, which is all really important. But the one that really struck me was protecting the audience experience. And you just referred to that. So many open micers and so many people that try to throw up a comedy club or a comedy night don't seem to understand that there's an audience, whether they're paid or not, that needs to be entertained. Entertaining the audience is the key goal of any comic and producer, right, Tina?
Yes. And, when it comes to the idea of, putting up people, I mean, there's always we've talked about already so many different types of mics, right? So for an open mic, for example, like a sign up, go up, right? Like usually, I mean, people are like pretty much on board. Like it's like, okay, we're going to have a poet, we're going to have a writer, we're going to have a comedy, we're going to have a musician, right? So it's kind of like a hodgepodge of everything. So like that, the idea of that, diversity of acts is already interesting for a lot of audience members that go in. But then when you look at something that's like a curated show, you could, a lot of time people say, well, you should put killer after killer and killer. I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, like, sometimes the best comedy is from someone who's just new, who's just started. I mean, I've been very fortunate to see such a variety of different acts that have been coming by at Comedy Mackay that we book, right? We give them 5 minutes at the pro-am show. So they're performing with professionals. And then like you sometimes see the rawest comedy, right? Like it's not something that's like completely polished, but something that is still really funny. And the thing is like, I usually have those people vetted for, right? So I do have a person who assists me with booking in that sense. We also try to aim for variety. So I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions about, oh yeah, diversity. Oh, what? Another lineup with bros, right? For us, for me at least, as a comedy lover who loves even going to shows outside of producing my own, is the fact that I, like different perspectives, right? Like if someone has like a different perspective and like something that makes it so that I could see things in a different way and laugh about it, or like even just educating, right? Like even, sometimes one of the things that I find very funny about stand-up is that like, to educate, right? And being able to combine all of those aspects to curating a very interesting lineup. But there's not a lot of people who do that because sometimes the problem that we do as producers, and this is something I really catch myself on, is booking all of our buddies, right? Like you book the same like 12 people on rotation, rinse and repeat, and it gets very boring very quick. Or you're trying to please the entire comedy community, which is fine. I mean, like I want to like give people opportunities, but like sometimes people feel like if I don't book them, like that I think that they're terrible, whereas in actuality, I'm just wanting to curate a variety for my show.
Well, that's where you have to have the backbone. A producer is the boss, and that means that you're going to piss off some people, and that's just tough shit. You just have to, right? It's what's best for the show. It's what's best for the audience is what happens. And you mentioned a couple things I wanted to touch on. One is that, people want to see the season pro after pro after pro, but that is not the best format for a show. Just to give you a little background, Tina, before I got into comedy, I was a music DJ at a nightclub. You can't just play fast music over and over and over and over. The audience won't stay up dancing. They get tired. So you have to do a plan where you start off with soft music, slow music, and maybe medium music, build up to a crescendo of music and speed and dancing, and then go back down to slow stuff and give them a break. Well, comedy is very similar that way. You want the easier stuff up front and build, and then you have your A headliner is the crescendo of the show, and get the biggest guffaws. If the guy that goes up first gets the biggest guffaws, nobody's going to be able to follow him. You're making it an impossible situation. You also mentioned that you don't do just comedy. You're doing some of your open mics include poetry and music and different things. And I think that's a whole different ball of wax. And to be honest, Tina, I've never dipped my toe into that. I love all the variety arts, but I always stuck to, had to be comic jugglers, comic ventriloquists, magicians, prop comics, and stand-up comics. But it was always comedy-based. And you were very brave to mix all the others because I have found that audiences are not that eclectic, and you'll have some people coming in for poetry and some people coming in for music and some people coming in for comedy, and it's that rare audience that will sit through all of them. Now, are your rooms generally free to the public, paid? Are you having a cover charge?
Yeah, so basically, for our Tuesday show, we have a ticket. So it's $15 a day of. So we usually do like student deals. So like half off, if you have your student ID. So we generally like to create specials for our patrons. So for the open mic that we have for the multidisciplinary one, that one's free to the public. We also do host a monthly open mic, right? So it's the last Tuesday of every month we have an open mic. So we do that for the community because we do believe that, having an open mic, especially at one of our best venues that we hold our shows, kind of creates this type of special experience for comedians. It makes it a lot more special, and they're like, they're anticipating the open mic, right? And we used to have that mic weekly, but then we wanted to, also take some time to experiment with different concepts and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I am brave, I guess. I don't know. I'm just like, I just think, sometimes the hard part about being an artist or being a comedian, is the fact of being able to find the space to create or to try new things and to be not afraid, right? Because a lot of time, at least before I started stand-up comedy, I used to really care a lot about what people thought of me, right? Being able to be put in a box, right? Saying, okay, this is Tina. She does X, Y, Z, And one of the things that was really liberating, at least for me within my stand-up journey, is that now I could just really not care. Like, if you don't like me, that's okay. Like, I'm not going to be for everyone. But the people that I do care about are the ones that I focus my attention on. So I don't know if it's because of stand up or it's because I'm almost 40, but it could be a combination of both, right?
Exactly. And you're making a good point, is that people get into comedy because they have, we all have that psychological issue where we want to be loved and we want to be liked, and we're looking for the attention and the approval of the audience. Every comic, it doesn't matter how successful or how new they are, is looking for gratification and that vibe from the audience, that wave of basically love from the audience. Yeah, we appreciate what you're doing and how you're entertaining us. And so that is always kind of the background in stand-up comedy. But when you're a producer, and this is why a lot of comics don't become producers, no offense, Tina, because it is two different beasts. You're obviously a very creative person, and that is the comedy side, the entertainment side, the musician in you. A producer is a hardcore business person. So yeah, I can go up on stage. I've emceed some of the biggest shows and concerts, my own TV series. And so I do have a sense of humor. I can relate to the audience. I can be funny, but that is not my goal. My goal is, as a producer, to run the business aspect of it, make sure the audience is entertained. I have the right lineup. The price for the ticket equals the value they're going to get in the show. It's a real business arrangement, and mixing those two can be challenging. It sounds like you've been pretty successful. Now, the reason we have you on the podcast, Tina, is you've got this new book coming out, How to Host a Comedy Show, and then it's subtitled Why Comedy Shows Fail and How to Run a Room. Now, Tina, why don't you share with the audience what you think are some of the key components in your new book?
So, yeah, no, of course. I know we talked about it a little bit in the beginning about like this idea of trust, energy, and flow, especially when facilitating a show, right? But being able to point out like different types of examples, right? So a lot of time I felt, right, that hosting was always overlooked as this like, it's part of the comedian's job that they should know how to host, right? It's like all you have to do is say hi, what your name is, the rules of the room, and then whatever. And then you say, okay, well, here's your next act.
Yeah. It's a little more complicated than that. So I think it's great that you put it on paper.
Yeah, and and it's so crazy because like I mean, it was definitely a process, like with writing this book because I also do French comedy, right? So I do comedy in French here because Quebec is bilingual, and so a lot of the time of me watching those shows is like, seeing how, successful certain rooms are, even if they have 3 people in there. So one of the things that I mentioned is I talk about the background of comedy on Mackay, right? So I talk about how, when you start a room, it's like we talk about being an entrepreneur, right, Scott? So the whole idea of having to create our own luck, right? Being able to create our own opportunities, being able to create things that would be beneficial for the community. And so one of the things that I mentioned is one of our most successful shows, which was the anniversary show when we turned 1 year old, and being able to talk through that, right? The idea of how do you engage with a group of strangers that you've never met, which is really weird, right? Like the whole idea is engaging with a group of people that you've never met, right? And it's better if you don't know them because then you can inspire some sort of like joke, like some sort of like laughter from people that you've never met in your whole life. And
it's a true, real reaction.
Yeah, it's a very authentic because like one of the things that I mentioned is like, the goodwill, right? Like if you have your friends go to your show, right? And they're like, oh yeah, we've been buddies for like 20 years, right? You already have the goodwill. You don't have to break through the fourth wall. Right. So the thing is they know you as like you, right? Or they know me as me. But when you're having to break through the fourth wall, it's something that's like, I love it. This is like, I think I do stand-up comedy for the adrenaline of breaking through the fourth wall, right? Of being able to get the biggest pop, in the introduction, and then being able to have that good pop be the goodwill for like the first act, right? So, the idea of being able to have enough self-awareness to know when you shouldn't do time. Because a lot of the mistakes that hosts do is that they do time after someone who completely annihilated and crushed and like left you in stitches. And they're like adding like 2 or 3 minutes after that is that kills that energy. Whereas like in actuality, you want to ride that wave, right? And say, all right, I'm going to give you guys are like crazy. We're going to bring up our next act, Bob Dylan. I don't know. Like,
Bob Dylan. Wow.
I don't know. That was the first name that popped in my head.
No, but you're saying something so important, Tina. You want to keep the energy, keep the flow. And the host of the show is just the conduit to keep it all going. If you have a bad act, then the conduit or the host needs to go up and refocus the audience, capture them, and maybe do a couple minutes. But if you got a show rocking, you just want to move act to act to act with the minimal interruption, correct?
Exactly. And that's one of the things I talk about because like they don't teach you that like in stand-up class, like 100%. Right. So and one of the things that I found actually when because I used the idea of hosting a show, Scott, was terrible. Like I hated it, but I was like, okay, we have zero budget. Like this is very much do it yourself, right? Because we build our stage, we change the curtains, like we put up the light with our logo, we put up the stool, we create a mini theater, and it goes back to that analogy that I mentioned earlier. It's like, kind of like that backyard show that you put on for your friends in the neighborhood, right? And that's exactly what we aim for is that idea, that neighborhood feeling, like the idea that you feel like you belong there and that it's something really special,
Yeah, and I think what you're trying to achieve is so important. But I wanted to get back to the book. I want to make sure that in the book, you're mentioning the production side that is so important that so many new people don't understand. And you just mentioned it, so I'm so proud of you, Tina. But it is, you have to have proper lighting. You have to have proper sound. Yes. You should have a little riser. The background, a brick or a black curtain or something that doesn't throw the vision of the audience off. And then you even mentioned the traditional stool. I mean, it's so funny you said that. I produced shows for 100 years, and then I still do fundraisers. I still have the original stool, and I take it to every show. And whether people use it or not, it's there because it needs to be there. It's all part of this setup. So lighting, sound, all that. Is that also in the book, Tina?
Yes, I also mentioned those aspects because, when you're putting on a show, a lot of the mistake that I see a lot of people do is that like comedians aren't well lit, and when people aren't well lit or minimum, like the elevation is so important. I don't know if you're familiar with Judy Carter's book, but Judy actually does an excellent job of like explaining this in her comedy Bible book. But like even just being elevated, like just a couple of inches makes such a big difference. And having a good microphone, like, so for example, at Comedy Mackay, we use Shure microphones.
Oh, wow. Those are good.
Yeah, we have two of them just because, we always want to
always have to have a backup. And do you use a wired mic or wireless?
We use a wired mic.
That's the way to go. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Let's hear it. So many people want to go wireless because it's the new technology, but a producer knows that a wired mic never goes out on you. The battery never dies, and you have consistent quality sound. So Shure mics with a wired connection, yay for you, Tina. That's exactly what people should be doing.
Well, and on top of that, for our Pro-Am show, we also are aware of levels. Well, because I'm also a musician. And, the space that we're in is not acoustically perfect. Like, it's not like we're at, like, the...
Yeah, they never are, yeah.
Like, yeah, so because it is still a bar, right? And we have we even bought soundproof curtains to separate the back room from the bar, right? But there's a limitation to that, right? So one of the things that I had really mentioned was sometimes there are people who naturally have very soft voices that make it very difficult to hear. So the thing is, I have a sound tech person who actually is able to adjust levels as needed, right? Just to make sure that each of the acts is able to be heard.
Yeah, you got a soundboard, right?
Yeah. And essentially like those aspects, like even though people like say, well, if you just have a microphone in in a box, like you should be okay. Yeah. I mean, for example, if you're outside, right? If you're doing an outside show,
the worst.
It's the worst, right? Like you're outside in like 100-degree weather, like with a microphone, trying not to have the sweat go into your eyes and look like you're crying, and you're telling jokes to like a handful of people who are willing to listen, and so the thing is, like, what I talk about is being able to create the conditions, or at least the best conditions that you have within the things that are available to you to put on a successful show. And I also do talk about the failures, and I mentioned it earlier, is that people sometimes don't understand that when I write a lineup, or if someone writes a curated lineup, right? So when I book, when I get one person, I book around that show. I book the featured acts according to the first person who would be able to open, a strong anchor in the middle, and then like a person that I know could bring it home at the end, right? And then like I sprinkle the guest spots, right, which are like the equivalent of drop-in spots according to that energy, right? And so sometimes people say, oh, I'm gonna, I need to go first, and I'm like, you can't go first. If you go first,
you're the boss. They don't get to request what they get. They're lucky if they get frickin' stage time, and it's up to the producer to tell them when and where. And you also have to control how long they're on stage. You can't let one of those people go up that's supposed to do 3 minutes and ends up going 10. It throws off the whole show. You have to be strict. That's why they're so strict on television. You have to have a timeline that not only you as the producer can control the flow and the energy of the entertainment to the audience, but also to teach that maintenance of the show, the respect of the stage.
Oh, hands down. And, I'm not shy to, like, I think, a couple of weeks ago, we had a very problematic comedian who decided it would be a great idea to do part of his edgelord set, like at a woman-owned and managed bar. And it got to the point where, like, I made the call. I said, this person has to get off the stage, because it is a privilege to be in this room. It is a privilege to be doing comedy. This person is not entitled to everything. And I also talk about that in the book, you know.
Good for you.
You know, some aspects of, like, when we have to say no, or how do you say no? And some parts I make little scripts, like, you know, sometimes people, like, you know, they need that. They need something in words. So one of the things I say is that, you know, I put, like, I think one or two prompts saying, this is how you can say no in a professional way if something is not, you know, going your way, or if, you know, you have to say no. You
Right.
As a producer, we shouldn't always be entitled to say yes. Like, people think, oh yeah, they'll say yes because they're my friend. And I'm like, if I like you enough, I will make it work for you, right? But the thing is, like, you know, people sometimes don't realize that, you know, it, like, creating authentic relationships is a two-way street.
Well,
and being kind can go a really long way.
Yeah. So you mentioned so many things of importance there. It's so important to read the room, know where you're performing, respecting the stage, you know, use a carrot and a stick. Hey, I'm going to let you on my stage. And if you abuse it, you're never going to get on that stage again. So if I had that guy do that, I would have never, I said, look, next time you want to come back, I'll see you in 3 months, because you're not getting on stage before then. It's so funny, Tina. Back in the day in my clubs, I actually had a hook, and I could reach from behind and hook people off the stage, and the audience always loved it. But of course, that was more of a joke. When I had somebody abusing my stage, I literally would just walk out and say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, he's done. Let's hear it for him. And they'd look at me in this shock and horror, and I go, hey, if you're not doing what I tell you to do, the way I tell you to do it, and how I tell you to do it, you're not going to be on my stage. And I know that makes me an asshole, but that's what makes my shows work. And my clubs, 47 years later, are still operating. And it's because...
Well, congratulations. That's
I
amazing.
do it right. Yeah, no, it's well, that's me, but we're here to talk about you. So, Tina, we want to tell people where and when they can get this book, because it sounds like it's full of great information, not only for comics that should understand the responsibility of a show production and how to do their own open mic, but for all the wannabe producers or people that think that, you know, hey, we need an opportunity to showcase the community talent, the local talent, so we need to create a room. Tina Cruz's book, How to Host a Comedy Show, is the way to go. So, Tina, tell them where they can get the book.
You'll be able to get the book on my website at tinatellsjokes.com, and you'll be able to get it on Amazon. But if you're listening in Canada, you could get it for a discounted price. If you're
That's it. Screw the Americans.
No. It's just because, like, mail is difficult. It's actually, I always direct people to Amazon because, like,
I'm just teasing, Tina. It's okay.
Easier.
Amazon is, I've written 3 books, and 2 of them on comedy, and they're on Amazon, and they do quite well. But ladies and gentlemen, it's called How to Host a Comedy Show. Write this down. How to Host a Comedy Show, subtitled Why Comedy Shows Fail and How to Run a Room. You can get it on Amazon, or go direct to Tina Cruz's website at www.tinatellsjokes.com. That's tinatellsjokes.com. Tina, I could tell it's full of valuable information. It's going to be an asset to anybody interested in stand-up comedy or even entertainment as a whole. Like you said, it could be music, it could be poetry. But it's so great that you took the time to take what you've learned in your short comedy life and share it with others. Thank you so much, Tina.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's great information. As a lifelong producer, I love, as you probably picked up on, I love talking about this stuff. But it's so important to remember, people, that there's a difference between entertaining and producing. Tina's wearing both hats, which is challenging. But if you want to be an entertainer, you should understand the responsibility of the producer, and the producer needs to understand what it takes to get up on an open mic in front of a bunch of strangers and be funny or try to be funny. So it is a copacetic situation. You need to work together. And as I've said a couple times, respect the stage, respect the audience. And Tina, it sounds like your book hits all the right marks. Ladies and gentlemen, Tina Cruz. Tina, thanks so much for sharing about your book. Ladies and gentlemen, go to tinatellsjokes.com. Any last words for our audience?
Yeah, it's all about creating your own luck.
Oh, that's so well put. Yeah, you got to, especially if you want to produce your own show, it's, create your own success. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Oh, look at that. Ladies and gentlemen, you get all this information and a lifelong quote to take with you right there. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been Tina Cruz on the Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC podcast. Thank you, Tina, for joining us from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. Be sure to tell your family and friends. We'll be back next week with another great show. Thanks for listening. Bye. Say bye, Tina.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.